Hey, how's everybody doing? Go ahead and let me know in the chat how my audio is, if I'm too loud or too low. I just want to make sure that everything checks out before we bring Myron Gaines to the stage. This is a pretty big deal for us here at Propaganda & Co. This is a pretty big deal. Yeah, my audio sounds good. So, Wally, I'm going to introduce to the audience who Myron is first. And then once Myron gets in the stage and I'm done with the intro, just go ahead and add him for me. But we'll give a couple moments here for people to join the stream. So we'll let people trickle in. We were originally supposed to do this at 8, but we were waiting for Myron, and Myron's pretty busy and he's got a much larger stream to tend to. So but we've heard from him now. We're going to add him here in just a bit. So let me go ahead and explain to you guys who Myron is and what we're doing. So Myron is, actually, give me 1 second here. Sorry. Okay. All right. So tonight we're speaking with Myron Gaines, otherwise known as Fit, from Fresh and Fit. If you never come across his work before, he has created one of the largest, most successful podcasts in the Red Pill manosphere. And he has over 1.5 million subscribers, almost 1 billion collective views on YouTube. And he's actually been demonetized by YouTube for quote unquote policy violations. Before Myron was a successful podcaster, he was an interesting character. He was a special agent with Homeland Security investigations. And apparently, I didn't know this, but he carried out, or he helped assist in, cartel stings on the southern border. So his background as a federal agent, coupled with his influence as a podcaster in the Red Pill manosphere, which is essentially a response to feminism in society, makes him a very controversial lightning rod in the raging culture war. And so I wanted to speak to him tonight because, as you guys know, there is this growing rift on the right in the conservative movement over America's toxic relationship with Israel. And Myron, like many other podcasters in the populist wave, essentially, has criticized and exposed America's relationship with Israel. Myron has not only exposed a lot of the atrocity propaganda post-October 7th and Israel's actions, their genocidal actions in Gaza, but he has also been part of this discourse on the right. And no matter what you think of Myron's views, what you can't deny is that he shapes the way millions of young Americans view geopolitics, American foreign policy. In fact, one of the first times I really came across Myron, because I've seen his content before, but I didn't really subscribe to his channel and watch too many of his podcasts with Fresh and Fit. But I saw him do an interview with Scott Ritter about the Russia-Ukraine war. And I thought, well, this is very interesting because, we all know about Andrew Tate, but I've never seen Andrew Tate have this level of discussion with one of the biggest experts in this space. And so that really intrigued me. And I thought that was very interesting. And then I came to follow Myron and I saw that, he is in Twitter spaces and constantly posting tweets challenging Zionists and Jewish supremacy in America. And so I thought, okay, this is a guy definitely that I'd like to hear from and connect with. And so the reason why we've brought him tonight is so that we can hear from him, have him educate us about his perspective and kind of give us a better understanding of what's happening on the right. Propaganda & Co. is a platform that has many different people from different walks of life, different political perspectives and philosophies. And so, but a lot of people, I think, watch our channel are on the left and they don't get exposed enough, I think, to people on the right. And so I wanted to bring Myron on tonight for that reason. So I'm going to ask Wally now if Myron is all set up, if you can add him to the stage.
Yo.
Hey, Myron, how you doing, man?
I'm good, bro. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I apologize for, I literally woke up and I saw your message. I was like, you know what? Let me do your guys' interview first, and I'll go ahead and do my stream after the fact, man. I didn't want to leave you guys hanging, so I apologize about that. I had a late night yesterday.
Well, No, I really appreciate that, man. I know how busy you are, and honestly, it's very gracious of you to join our platform for the night. We don't have
No,
as
no,
many
absolutely.
followers, obviously, but it says a
Nah,
lot
nah,
about.
man. I've praised your work many times. I've shown, a couple of your videos, especially the Red Heifer one, which, a lot of that stuff, I'm not a religious guy like that. So getting the religious perspective on why some of these things are happening was very eye-opening and very important. I don't think a lot of people know it. So really good stuff, man. Really good stuff. And me and you have talked behind the scenes on some other things with your
Yeah.
channel. So like a lot of potential, man. Really great stuff. I like it.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, man. That means a lot coming from you. So, Myron, let's just hop right into it, man.
Sure.
So, tell me about, I guess, your political perspective. Is it correct to describe you as a conservative or someone more politically on the right?
Yeah, for sure. Most of the things that I believe when it comes to on the political spectrum, most people would deem as right, or depending on who's asking, they'll say far right or alt right. But to be honest with you, the only thing that really differentiates your normal conservatives or your normal right wingers a lot of the times is anyone that's like critical of Israel or talks about race realism or any of this stuff. That's when they start to get into a little bit more of the alt right or far right. But typically, what I've realized, the main differentiator is almost always the criticism of Israel or Zionism or any of that other stuff in America.
Interesting. So, speaking of Israel, there is this raging debate on the right over America's relationship with Israel. You've been deeply involved in this conversation. What exactly, if you could describe, let's say, to a liberal audience who usually, and not to say that I have a liberal audience, but my audience is diverse and mixed.
Yeah.
But if you were speaking to liberals and leftists who have never really given you a chance or aren't familiar with the discourse taking place on the right, how would you describe to them what is happening over the relationship with Israel and the way that it's creating a rift on the right, specifically with the MAGA movement?
Yeah. So for me to go ahead and be able to touch base with them, let me kind of start from where they are. So we know that right now, Israel, Zionism, et cetera, is not a very popular topic in American political discourse. And both factions, whether Democrat or Republican, both oppose it to a degree, but for different reasons. So on the left, they typically oppose Israel from a humanitarian standpoint. The dying children, the starvation, the blockades, the lack of human rights, the lack of sovereignty, the lack of the ability to be able to have self-determination, right? The dying kids. Like from the left, they typically come in from that perspective from the humanitarian side, right? Which is good because this is a topic that prior to October 7th, not many people talked about in America, right? Now on the right, though we don't have as many critics of Israel on the right because the right is controlled by, Zionist lobbies, we come, the few of us that are critical of Israel, we come more from, we also acknowledge the humanitarian problem, right? I've posted, as much as I hate to do this, but I have to do this sometimes so that stupid Republicans can see what our tax dollars are, where they're going. I'll post sometimes the people that are dying in Gaza so they realize, because with a lot of people, a lot of Americans had this inability to understand how the world works outside of the United States. A lot of Americans don't have a passport. A lot of them have never been out the country. A lot of them are completely unaware of foreign policy, especially in the conservative space, which I could talk about that later on. But I show these images to kind of wake them up and let them know, like, this is what's going on and we're paying for this and allowing this to happen. So from the conservative space, obviously we still have the problems with the humanitarian side, right? With the dying children and stuff. I call this out all the time. But the big difference that people on the right, a big difference that we have from the left when it comes to our criticisms of Israel is we do it more from a nationalistic perspective. So in other words, we don't like a foreign government dictating our foreign policy, right? Conservatives tend to be more nationalistic. They tend to have more country pride. And having a country run your foreign policy, especially run your foreign policy where they're killing kids with your tax dollars, is a big problem. So when we say, a lot of people like to say America first, I say America only, right? Because I don't like the fact that we're taking our hard-earned tax dollars to drop bombs on kids. So that's I would say, one of the main differences between the left and the right. We both acknowledge the humanitarian crisis, but from the right, we also come in and say, look, we got this foreign government that we're doing their bidding. We're being puppet controlled, and we need to take back our country. And we also are very critical of, how do I say this? Because we're on YouTube. I call them boys. On my channel, I call them boys, because if you drop the J word too many times, they're going to go crazy. So we also talk a lot about how them boys have way too much power in all realms of American culture, whether it's finance, politics, media, pornography, sports even, right? Running the NBA. Like they have an enormous amount of influence in powerful institutions all across the country. And whether they're right wing or left wing, they utilize their influence and their power to support Israel. You could take someone like a Bill Ackman, who's a lifelong Democrat, right? But look what he's doing. He's going against Zandani out in New York. Why? Because he's not a fan of Israel, right? So a lot of these Zionists, they'll sit there and say they're American or whatever, but when it comes to where they put their money, what they vote for, et cetera, they're single issue voters for the benefit of Israel. And this passes, partisan lines. And this is something that's very important for people to realize, that when it comes to the protection of Israel, this is when you'll see conservative and liberal Zionists, kind of come to the middle. So that's kind of what that's what I would say is like one of the main differences from the conservative space is we acknowledge their power in other institutions in the United States, right? They'll call that anti-Semitism. And then we also acknowledge the fact that them being in these influential positions hurts our nationalism, because they have ulterior motives and subvert their influence and their money. They'll sit there and say they're American, but they have dual allegiance, and they'll utilize that dual allegiance to benefit Israel over the United States.
Yeah, very well said. That was a great explanation. This is actually something that I want to focus on, because there's a raging debate right now about how to tackle this issue and to deal with the fact that the majority of Jews are Zionists. They support Israel and everything that they're doing, which includes ethnic cleansing, genocide, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll just give you my perspective. I was an activist in college. I resonate with a lot of like leftist policies, economically at least. I guess I can consider myself an anti-imperialist, but I never really liked labels. And there's a lot on the right that I do resonate with. And I personally take no issue with people feeling a nationalistic, patriotic pride towards their country. This doesn't really bother me. I am an American citizen, but I acknowledge that, I'm a little different than the average American. So I'm just an open-minded person. I guess, people's views don't really bother me. But when I was in college, I was an activist. I was the president of the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter at my university. And we had this large divestment campaign calling on the university to disinvest funds in the occupation of Palestine, the military industrial complex, every industry that supports the occupation of Palestine. And in our discourse, we would always be sure to separate Zionism from Judaism, even though we understand that the majority of Jews are Zionists. Mm-hmm. So, but I always viewed it as Zionism as really a form of Jewish supremacy. And now there's this raging debate, even amongst like lifelong Palestine supporters, Palestinians themselves, who acknowledge and recognize the solidarity that many anti-Zionist Jews have shown. They still say that, hey, this is becoming like, this is a Jewish problem. Like Jews need to stand up against this. They need to be louder and take this fight into their own communities and say, stop doing this in our name, which does happen.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what do you make? Like, you focus a lot on the question of Jewish supremacy, and some people might say that you go a little too far. What are your thoughts on this distinction between Zionism and Judaism?
So I think people need to understand that, like, for a very long time, they've been persecuted, right? From, exiled from many different countries, targeted, right? They've gotten in trouble. A lot of their host countries were moved over 1,000 times over, thousands of years. So people need to understand that they have a certain level of resolve where they're going to stick together, right? There's a saying, if one Jewish man gets, if one Jewish guy gets money, 10 others are going to get money. They stick together. They have tight-knit communities. And I do agree with you that, labeling all of them and saying like, oh yeah, you guys are all evil because you guys are all Zionists. I argue all the time how some of the most prominent pro-Palestine voices are actually Jewish, right? You could talk about like, Glenn Greenwald, Norman Finkelstein, Max Blumenthal, who made the fantastic documentary Atrocity Inc. I've shared that plenty of times, where they debunk a lot of the October 7th stuff that me and Suleiman had discussed before. There's a lot of prominent guys, Dave Smith, that are Jewish and are, on the right side of history. So, some people might disagree with me and say, like, I don't think it's necessarily a Jewish problem. I think that it's a lot of the times a Zionist problem. Now, are there parts where it intersects because of belief systems, et cetera? Of course. But I think to throw the baby out with the bathwater is not a good idea, especially when a lot of these people can go ahead and get into certain rooms and have certain discussions that we can't. Look, let's just be very candid here. Someone like Dave Smith is going to be able to get on Joe Rogan and talk about these issues to a huge audience. That's a W. Despite the fact that people might say, man, he's not going hard enough, or they might be pissed off. That's a huge W. Like when Ian Carroll went on Joe Rogan and talked about Epstein and the dancing Israelis, that's huge. This is a topic that prior to October 7th, you couldn't talk about. You would be banned. And just to give you guys a little bit of history, our podcast is one of the first podcasts to talk about this issue prior to October 7th. Prior to October 7th, most Americans didn't even know what Zionism meant, right? And I hosted Nick Fuentes Debating Destiny on this situation, and it was extremely eye-opening to everyone. We had like 100,000 plus people watching live. And, a lot of people didn't even understand what's going on in the Middle East. They didn't understand why we give this country all this aid, et cetera. And then, obviously, when you figure out the Middle Eastern foreign policy, you're able to kind of work it back and figure out how do they have all this influence? How do they drop bombs on people without any type of consequences? Why do we cover it for them at the UN? Why are they able to do all the things that they do without going to jail? Why is Netanyahu wanted by the ICC, but nothing's happening? So when people start doing the research, they figure this out and they slowly start to realize, holy crap, we have we are occupied by a foreign country, and they have an enormous amount of resources and power and influence in America. But a lot of people don't know this because a lot of them look like they're Caucasian, so people wouldn't know better unless you look at them and you see their last name or whatever. Hell, some of them change their last names. So that's kind of what it is. But I would say to go back to your question, there definitely is a distinction, and I think not making that distinction at times puts you in a bad spot because we're getting to a point now where this is starting to become mainstream, if it's not already. So I think people need to be very sharp and eloquent when we talk about this topic to not be written off as a retard. Because a lot of people will come in and the Jews. No, dude, you can't do that. You got to kind of come in, name the names, name the events, be extremely detailed, because now it's going to start getting more and more scrutiny as it starts to become more and more popular. What was once a fringe topic in Reddit forums is now becoming public discourse on huge platforms like Joe Rogan. I'll never forget this, and I'll land on this. Candace Owens went on Theo Von, Andrew Tate went on Full Send, and Ian Carroll was on Joe Rogan. All three of those podcasts dropped on the same day. On all three of those podcasts, there was significant talk about them boys, which is unheard of, man. Yeah. Unheard of. Because literally before October 7th, you could not talk about this. If you even mentioned JFK potentially being assassinated by Israel, you would get banned. So it's good to see that this information is coming out there, but since it's now being allowed and being on big platforms, we can't revert to using stupid, basement jokes and everything else like that. We have to be extremely articulate and accurate with this stuff.
Yeah, that's very well said. And, Israel, obviously, they love anti-Semitism because they use it as a justification for everything that they do. They use it to justify their very own existence. We have to exist because of the dangerous levels of anti-Semitism, et cetera, et cetera. We're not safe anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And so they use this. And so, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. We have to be careful in the way that we engage in this discourse. So you have definitely pointed out that this is a conversation that is now spreading all throughout the society, and people are being exposed to this in a way that they've never been exposed to this before. When I was in college, we worked very hard to reach people, but I would dream of this moment. Over a decade ago, we never had this kind of exposure, and now it's just everywhere. And so I'm grateful for that. I want to ask you, though, because sometimes we get trapped in our bubbles and we think that who we follow and what the algorithm shows us is what the majority of the people in America are thinking and feeling and being exposed to. So on the right, what are the numbers like? We've seen the Pew Research. I think for the first time ever, more than half the country they now have negative views of Israel. And we've seen amongst young people on the right, young Republicans, they are increasingly anti-Israel. Mm-hmm. But are we in a bubble, or is this really as widespread as we think it might be?
That's a damn good question, man. At this very moment, at the time that we're doing this interview, from the conservative side, I would say we're in a bubble. Because I think on the right wing, the right wing is filled with a lot of idiots that still think Fox News is correct, right? And accurate about everything, right? They believe the bullshit about, the United States totally destroyed Iran's nuclear program, and, they're completely destroyed, and they didn't go ahead and actually hit Tel Aviv back hard. So a lot of conservatives fall for the propaganda, right? And a lot of them are not. And the other big thing, and I touched on this earlier, but I'll touch on it now since we're on this topic. I would say the left wing is far more aware when it comes to this problem, because due to the nature that progressives tend to be more empathetic to human suffering, et cetera, than conservatives do, especially with foreigners. A a lot of times they'll be aware of what's going on when it comes to foreign policy. Conservatives aren't that way, right? They're not. And I would argue a lot of conservatives, if you look at the top conservatives, right, let's go ahead and go through it. You got Crowder, Bongino, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, people from PragerU, Blaze, etc. None of these guys really cover Middle Eastern foreign policy, right? And there's a reason for that. The reason why they don't cover Middle Eastern foreign policy or foreign policy in general, and they'd rather talk about trans and, gays or, drag queens reading to kids at schools, right? Or race stuff or cultural stuff, is because you have to deal with the elephant in the room when you talk about foreign policy, and you need to deal with the elephant that Israel controls our foreign policy. Well, they don't want to touch that because it's going to put them in a very uncomfortable position where they have to acknowledge that, or worse yet, do kind of like what Charlie Kirk is doing, saying they don't run us, blah, 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 which we all know that's a lie. They absolutely do. So what a lot of commentators do that are big in the right wing is they just kind of avoid it because they don't want to deal with that headache. They'd rather go and beat up on, trans and, race issues or whatever, because that will still get them the clicks without them having to deal with this ugly reality that our country is controlled. The other reason, too, why the right wing doesn't talk about it is because conservative media is controlled by them. Let's just call a spade a spade. It's absolutely controlled by them, right? And in the right wing, if you talk about this topic, they're going to work to cancel you. You got, I'm sure everyone here knows my buddy Nick Fuentes. Very sharp guy. He got into the podcasting early in his life. And he started asking questions like, wait, why do we give all this money to Israel? How do we benefit? Blah, blah. They immediately silenced him and kicked him off everything, banned them everywhere. And I'm so happy for him that he's finally getting the acknowledgement and the recognition he deserves, because he's been talking about this for a very long time, right? And that's an example of what I mean when I say conservative media will absolutely destroy you if you talk about this topic. That's why so few people on the right talk about it. Right now, obviously, you got people like myself, Candace Owens, Nick, etc. But this has been a suppressed topic for decades. So I will acknowledge that, like, the progressives are better at talking about this problem because they have a little bit more wiggle room to talk about it because the humanitarian crisis that's going on. But on the right, they've stayed away from it because conservative media is controlled by them. And they don't want to lose the ability to be invited to events, lose collabs, lose relevance, all this other stuff. It's a death blow if you're a conservative, if you're a right-wing political commentator to talk about this.
So I would say that the conservatives on the right are a couple years behind. The left, they've definitely been more informed about this issue, and they've cared about this issue, and they've shown more solidarity with Palestinians. But, even that is a recent development in the last 10, 12 years, really, since Israel carried out their first attacks on Gaza in 2008, 10, 12, 14, etc. So conservatives are just now catching up. It's going to take time, but because of the internet, they can close that gap a lot faster. I want to ask you, why do you
agree they're behind?
How far behind?
No. I said I agree with you. They're definitely behind. Because
behind, but
conservative politics doesn't cover foreign policy like that. Like, I've noticed that very few, if you look at the top political commentators on the right, they rarely, if ever, cover foreign policy.
Yeah.
But sorry, you were saying?
They're starting to, right? And this
gap they are now.
Is going to be closed soon enough. What do you think it is about the right that is making so many people interested? We keep hearing about the decline of the U.S. empire. People everywhere, we see it in entertainment, we see it in the media now. Everyone just has this feeling that America is in decline. And that manifests itself in so many different ways. It's whether it's the economy, the rise of China, the tension over tariffs with China and competing with them, or just driving on the street and noticing that there are potholes everywhere. Why do our airports look like crap, et cetera, et cetera? What is it? Is it the economic situation? Is it immigration? Is it everything combined that just makes conservatives now far more interested in American foreign policy, which obviously puts Israel in the spotlight, which now exposes their influence to them?
I think the thing that made it unavoidable now, even for the right, is the couple of things, right? You have, prominent guys, like I said before, like Nick, who, any guy that's a right, a conservative in America that's under the age of 30 more than likely probably listens to Nick, right? I would argue that Nick has more influence with the young men than, a Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk, who their audiences are going to be a little bit older, right? They have more the traditional conservative viewer base that likes Fox News and Sean Hannity, and then, Nick and the Grippers, they got the youth, definitely, right? Politics is something that I cover as a part of, but I also have brought in a lot of guys as well, where a lot of my fans are diverse from all over the place. I've awared a lot of them on this topic as well, and a lot of them are getting red pilled on it. So, and then you look at guys like Sneeko, for example. He has a huge audience of young guys that are aware of this stuff. So, we're catching up slowly but surely. But to go back to your question, it was
what is it that's making conservatives focus on Israel?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I think number one, the atrocities going on in Gaza. I think, because we're all on Twitter. We see what's going on. The mainstream media doesn't show it, of course. But I would say there's something about seeing little kids getting blown up, losing limbs, bleeding and suffering that invokes a sense of like rage, like what the fuck is going on here, right? So I think that's what's really brought this stuff to the forefront, because we're literally watching people get decimated in 4K. And obviously this has been going on for a very long time, right? But now we have the capability with the internet and smartphones to capture this grim reality of what's going on. And I think that has red-pilled a lot of people, especially in the right wing as well, because a lot of them are Christians, right? So they look at it like, what the hell's going on here? And I'll give credit to people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, who've been talking about this, and they have huge platforms, right? Because obviously these are people that worked in like legacy media for a while. You take someone like Tucker, and he's able to show his, or at least talk about this topic to his audience. I know some people say, oh, well, Tucker doesn't go hard enough. He just is asking questions. But I always say, look, everybody does their part. So if Tucker has an interview with Ted Cruz and asks him about what benefit do we get from supporting Israel, right? And Ted can't answer the question, Tucker doesn't need to start naming the dancing Israelis. The fact that he said that on such a big platform, people are going to start Googling. People are going to start researching. Then they're going to find me. They're going to find Nick. They're going to find Candace Owens, or people that watch Candace. They see that she got fired from the Daily Wire. Why'd she get fired? And then she goes ahead and she does that interview with Phil Turney from the USS Liberty. Gets millions of views, right? Because I had Phil Turney at my show as well. But, we got a couple 100,000, no big deal. But she got millions of views on that. So the exposure in itself is super important because people are curious. People are going to Google and say, wait, let me look into this. And they look into it, and then they're going to find all these other creators. So that can maybe take it a step further. My thing is, I always say, as long as you can get people to get into the rabbit hole and start searching, you did your job, right? If Ian Carroll subtly drops dancing Israelis on Joe Rogan, some people might say, come on, man, go further. No, dude, he's on a normie platform with Joe Rogan. Like, he doesn't want to destroy the ability to be able to go back there again. Like, it's good enough that he dropped that because people are going to go ahead and Google dancing Israelis, look that up. And then here's the most beautiful part. When they look that up and they find it out on their own, you kind of just planted the seed, they find it out on their own, it's going to stick in their head way more, because it's one thing to tell somebody something. It's another thing to tell them something. And then they go back, independently research, say, oh, crap. Now they're not going to forget because it confirms their own search. It's almost like a validation thing from a mental standpoint. So I think anyone that's like talking about this topic, no matter how deep or as shallow as it is, I think is a W, because this is such a forbidden topic for so long.
So what was it for you? What was that moment for you that sent you down the rabbit hole?
I'll say 9/11 and JFK. 9/11 and JFK definitely was like, what the fuck? Like, because, and whenever I talk about 9/11, a shout out to Ryan Dawson. I did a collab with him, and he really opened my eyes on this. I got to give him credit. Probably one of the best 9/11 researchers in the world. And he's going to drop another documentary on it. He had a documentary called Empire Unmasked that covers this in detail. He's going to drop a better version of it, I think, at the end of this year. But whenever I get into debates with Zionists, because, a lot of people say all the time, because I think the lazy thing is, like, a lot of people say, oh, the Jews did 9/11. That's not really, like, that's somewhat true, but that's a very, how do I say this? Like, unsophisticated way of saying that, because
it's too reductionist and simplistic.
Yeah. And you lose, though it's technically kind of true. I think something like that with an event that, that big, you need to cover it properly. So what I always tell people, and you can feel, anyone here that's listening can feel free to steal this. What I always say is, I'm not saying they did 9/11, but they absolutely had foreknowledge it was going to happen, allowed it to happen, and there was Israeli intelligence involved. And what I always say is, when the towers were hit and 5 guys are arrested in New Jersey for being on top of an apartment complex, celebrating and taking pictures and documenting the event, when the FBI arrested them and put them in custody and asked them questions, 2 of them failed the polygraphs, right? And one of them, I think 1 or 2 of them of the 5 had ties to Israeli intelligence. So it's indisputable that Israeli intelligence was not just involved in 9/11, but they witnessed 9/11. They knew it was going to happen and they celebrated it. I think that's terrible for someone that's supposed to be our greatest ally, right? So it's one thing if our own government does some fuck shit, but if a foreign government does it, well, that's a problem. And that's irrefutable. There's FBI, reports that show all this stuff that's declassified when they did their interviews. These guys failed polygraphs. They were absolutely linked to Israeli intelligence. And then, it gets even crazier because they got deported like 70 days later. And then the guy that owned, Urban Moving Systems, the moving company that these guys worked for, which was a front, he ran off to Israel, a guy named Dominic Suter. So, whenever I'm having discussions with people about this and they want to say, oh, are you going to be one of these crazy conspiracy theorists? Well, everything I just stated is irrefutable. This is all declassified FBI stuff. So you got Israeli intelligence assets witnessing the worst terrorist attack in American history from New Jersey, documenting it and celebrating it. And then to make it worse, they went on Israeli television after they got deported and admitted that they had foreknowledge and they were there to document the event so that Americans can see what Israelis go through all the time over in Israel. That at least raises some concerns. Like, what the hell's going on here, right? And then you add in the fact that the person that ran was one of the heads of the Department of Justice who oversaw Immigration Naturalization Service, because this is prior to 2003, aka the INS, because these guys were foreign nationals. They get deported 70 days after interview. I guarantee if those guys were fucking Arabs, they'd be in Guantanamo Bay to this day. But they, for some odd reason, ended up getting deported 70 days after being in immigration custody. That's weird, right? And then you find out that Chertoff, where's he? Zionist Jew, mom, involved with Mossad. What the hell, right? So it just creates more and more, ammunition for people to go in and investigate. And I think if people come in with that angle, where this is the irrefutable proof, you could draw your conclusions from that. I think that's the best way to always spin it. When I was an agent, right, we always had this saying, like, when you write your reports, your job isn't to sit there and make conclusions. Your job is just to present the facts, let the reader read it, and then come to their own conclusion based on the facts you present. And I think with those facts that I presented, I think anyone that's rationally sound will say, there's something there. And I think if you could do that, that's good enough.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, you kind of have to have your head in the sand if you can be exposed to that kind of information and still not feel like there's something else to explore here. And I agree with you.
And 90% of Americans don't even know it. That's the scary part, right? So, I can't tell you how many times I've explained this to people and they're blown away. They said, what? Yeah, dude, look it up. There's literally declassified documents on this. And like I said before, sometimes planting the seed is better than giving it all to them. They'll go and research it because it's such an interesting topic and they'll say, holy fuck, mind blown.
Yeah, and it's very important for people to understand it for themselves. So you're right. Planting the seed is really important. I agree with you. Ian Carroll on Joe Rogan was a great victory. I've been very happy to see Candace Owens do what she's doing. When I was younger, I considered her an ideological enemy. Not really because of domestic issues. It's not that I don't care about them. It's just, for me, I guess, because I'm from the Middle East, I'm more concerned with foreign policy because I'm from Iraq. My family suffered because of the U.S. invasion.
Yeah.
And I went back as a kid. I saw it before the war. I saw it after the war. And so foreign policy affects me in a way it doesn't affect the average American. And so seeing her on Prager University do this propaganda for Zionists, I considered her an ideological enemy. Now I consider her an ally. And I'm very, like, my sister-in-law watches Candace Owens and she hates politics, but she loves Candace Owens in the way that she presents it. So everyone is in their lane doing what they can and doing what they do best. And it's having an effect. Absolutely. So you're 100% right.
Yeah, because there's people that are just not going to like me because, they might consider me racist or too abrasive or too whatever, right? And that's fine. But Candace is able to touch another group of people that I'll never touch. Tucker able to touch a group that I'll never touch. Dave Smith, whatever. So everyone is able to kind of reach different people. And what you're seeing is, and I've talked about this before too, this is the only topic I've ever seen in my lifetime that has both united the people on the far left and the people on the far right, is this issue with, the destruction and the genocide of children in Gaza. This is absolutely, like, it's the only thing that I've ever seen both people on the far left and on the far right actually agree on. Because at the end of the day, you can sit there and say, I don't care about, foreign policy or whatever it is, but watching kids get bombed every day and killed for nothing more than just being at the wrong place at the wrong time, it invokes a certain level of empathy that even, the harshest of people are going to feel. So, and we're witnessing it real time. That's the crazy part. We're literally witnessing it real time because of the advancement of social media and smartphones. It's horrible that we're seeing it, but it's waking a lot of people up too.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. So he has a very influential movement, but that movement was very strong and growing prior to October 7th. October 7th was like an accelerant. It was a fuel just poured onto the fire that was already burning. And they've had a lot of virality since then. But beforehand, before he was replatformed onto X, which is basically the only like major platform that he's allowed back on, he still existed. Like he was on platforms I've never heard of, and not just Rumble, but like weird websites that like you only know about if you're trying to counter censorship.
Yeah.
He still had this large following. So like how it's just amazing that they can suppress and force these conversations underground, but they still grow.
Yeah.
So how is that in your view?
Yeah, sure. So to properly answer this, I'll talk about how censorship works in America. So for a lot of your foreign viewers, as you guys know, obviously we have the First Amendment here, but the way that they kind of get around that in the United States is you have like these lobby groups, right? These censorship groups. You got like the ADL, who I'm sure you know very well, Media Matters, SPLC, etc. And what they do is, because they've done this to me too, what they'll do is they'll see a creator that they don't like, especially when they talk about this topic, right? And they'll be like, oh, look, this guy's an anti-Semite, he's talking about this, whatever. And what they'll do is they'll contact YouTube, they'll contact Twitch, they'll contact these big platforms and lobby to get that person canceled. ADL just tried this with Hassan Piker, right? This is actually why I got banned. So I got banned on Twitch for off-platform behavior because of my criticisms of Israel. And what Twitch basically did was they banned me and Sneeko, and they kept Hassan on because they looked at it like, oh, look, ADL, we're doing something. We're getting rid of anti-Semites on Twitch. Because Jonathan Greenblatt, Jonathan Greenblatt was complaining to Clancy. Excuse me.
It's all good. Take your time.
I'll get some water real quick. Give me 1 sec.
Yeah. Do your thing. I'll explain who Jonathan Greenblatt is for those who don't know. He's the head of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. And this group is supposed to be focused on countering critics of Jews, I guess, anti-Semites. But they really now just focus on critics of Zionism and Israel. They've become a front, basically an extension of the Israel lobby, which is like an umbrella of different organizations that have different stated purposes and visions, but ultimately they all exist to defend Israel from criticism. And so anyone...
Sorry about that.
All good. I was just explaining who Jonathan Greenblatt was real quick. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Jonathan Greenblatt was lobbying to try to get Hassan canceled and a couple other Zionist politicians. And, even though I disagree with Hassan on a lot of things, I actually still defended him like, oh, this is bullshit. They're trying to censor an American citizen for, valid criticism of Israel. But that's just an example of what I mean when I say that they lobby with these big social media companies to get you canceled. The Media Matters will write a hit piece. ADL will then write a hit piece. They'll contact these social media companies and say, hey, are you aware of the fact that this individual is on your platform saying these things while getting AdSense money, while they're running ads? So what ends up happening is the platforms, instead of dealing with, losing potential advertisers, they just cancel you. They'll ban you. They'll shadow ban your video. They'll take you off the platform altogether, demonetize you. They'll do something to basically censor you, because whether people want to admit it or not, demonetizing someone or shadow banning videos, that is a form of censorship. It might not be overt, like terminating someone, but it's absolutely, I would argue it's an even bigger form of censorship, because if you demonetize someone and let them stay on the platform, what you've done basically is you've created like a chilling effect, like a fear effect, because everyone is going to say, oh, damn, I don't want to be like that. And they're going to, by, virtue of being able to continue to be on the platform or not lose their monetization, they're going to not talk about that topic. And that's what's been able to happen for several years. Now, when October 7th happened and we saw the atrocities play out, and we saw, kids getting killed, too many people came at once saying, yo, this is bullshit. Yo, this is bullshit. People on both the right and on the left. So now the ADL, Media Matters, SPLC, they can't go after everybody. It used to be, okay, one whack-a-mole, bam, this guy said something about Israel, let's get rid of him now, bam, right? One hit piece, he's gone. But now that you have so many different big creators talking about this stuff, the genie's out the bottle, and they can't effectively suppress it to the same way. That's why Jonathan Greenblatt's going on CNN and all these big platforms and crying like, oh my God, the anti-Semitism is on the rise. This is why because for those that don't know too, it was the ADL that lobbied and the Zionist groups that lobbied to get TikTok taken down. TikTok got taken down for 24 hours. The only reason it got brought back is because Trump had he liked TikTok because TikTok was crucial to his 2024 campaign. because it allowed him to reach a lot of young people. So since he was able to utilize TikTok and leverage it to win, he kind of said, I'll throw you guys a bone. He was able to get it reactivated within 24 hours. But when it came back, what happened? Free Palestine, the watermelons, from the river to sea, all this stuff was banned. You couldn't type it anymore. So, and the big reason why the ADL and these companies complained is because they didn't have direct access to TikTok like these other social media platforms. And John Greenblatt, even himself, he said, look, they said anti-Semitism is on the rise, and it's an age problem, a demographic problem is what he was saying. And he was blaming TikTok because TikTok has a huge amount of young people that use it. And, you had things like the Bin Laden letter going viral back at the end of 2023. You had 70% of pro-Palestine posts versus about 30% of Israeli posts. And TikTok is extremely influential to young people, right? Young people would rather be on TikTok than be on YouTube. So Jonathan Greenblatt kind of acknowledged this and lobbied to get it canceled. But that's how they do it in America, where they utilize these left-wing, I guess, media watch type agencies, and they write articles and they try to get you canceled. But the problem now is that strategy is not going to work anymore because there's too many people that are aware.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I actually got permanently banned off TikTok, even though I had given up on the platform. After October 7th, my videos were going viral on there, and I just stopped because they started suppressing and deleting my content. I checked back a month later after not opening the app, and I saw that I had been permanently banned. And I discovered that there was this organization, I'm sure but maybe my followers don't know, Unit 8200, which is intelligence apparatus of the Israeli military. When they graduate, a lot of their members go on to do startup companies, tech companies, et cetera, et cetera. Well, a group of them, former Israeli intelligence, created a group called Cyberwell. And what Cyberwell tries to do is identify and challenge digital anti-Semitism. So what they did was they created a PDF, and they would go to these major social media platforms and they would say, we have a list of people that we want you to remove because they are confirmed anti-Semites. And they had this map of influence. And on the map of influence post October 7th, there was all these different names. It was like a web. And at the center of the web, they had Propaganda & Co. Yeah. And that's how they got me banned off TikTok. I got deleted off Instagram 4 times. I managed to come back 5 times. Thankfully, I don't know how, but I was able to come back 5 times. And on YouTube, I was suspended for a week, but now I'm back. And I'll admit to you, speaking to you, I was nervous. I was like, I don't know if I should platform Myron, because he's demonetized, and I don't know if I want to get demonetized, but I want to provide a platform, to as many different voices as possible, because I'm trying to benefit myself and my audience and educate people. And, just speaking to you, this has been educational enough for me, honestly. And that is something, honestly, I follow you because I believe this of you, but I can tell right off the bat that you're not who they say they are, right? A lot of people have different ideas about who you actually are and what you actually think. And so,
well, a part of their ability to censor you is them painting you in a certain light and saying things about you that might not necessarily true, or they try to amplify a certain aspect of what you do to make it look like that's all you do, and in reality it isn't. So, but yeah, I mean, look, so you've experienced it too. That's what they do. They literally lobby to get people canceled. And I'm not surprised that they went to TikTok and said, anytime you start build influence on it, they'll lobby to get you canceled. I mean, hell, even to this day, Candace Owens got banned from Australia. How the hell is an American citizen, right, getting banned from going to Australia? Well, that goes to show it's not just in the United States that they have an enormous amount of influence. All the first world English-speaking countries and the Five Eyes have a significant overrepresentation of them in their highest levels of society. So, and she also got banned from New Zealand. She was able to get New Zealand back. But I think that goes to speak to the massive influence of Israeli power and Zionism worldwide. It's not just an American thing. It's they've infiltrated other governments as well. You look at Keir Starmer in the UK. I think his wife is one of them. And to this day, they will not acknowledge America or the UK. They will not acknowledge that what's going on in Gaza is a genocide, despite the fact that several genocide experts have called it that, to include Holocaust historians have called it that. So that are Jewish. So that just goes to show the enormous amount of influence they have in our government, where our politicians are even scared to say the G word for obvious reasons.
Yeah. And, one thing I think that's crucial to this conversation, what we're essentially talking about is a censorship of free speech. And free speech is such a core American value. And I think Fuentes obviously has always had these views, but I think what really set him down this path was this assault on his inalienable right to free speech, right? He's an American, and because he said something critical of Israel, he gets deplatformed and all debanked. He couldn't fly on planes for some time. Like, they really went after him and they affected his life in such an aggressive way. Ryan Dawson as well, many other people.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I've been arguing this since the beginning, the greatest victory of October 7th, obviously, is not going to be militarily. Like, Palestine is not free. In fact, you could argue things are worse. The West Bank is about to get fully annexed. Gaza has been decimated. The Palestinian population in Gaza is about to be dumped into the Sinai Desert if they're not starved to death. So you could argue that from a material sense, things are worse. But on the other side of the planet, there is this war now over the relationship with Israel and free speech. And Israel's in kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Because if they don't censor people, they let these ideas spread. But if they censor people, they entrench people further and the ideas continue to spread anyway. So they're in kind of like a sinking hole position. And that's why they understand. Ben Shapiro, I think, commented on this, and several other Zionists. They've talked about how this is a sinking ship. They're running out of time. The influence and control they've had over America won't last forever. And so they need to get as much as they can out of this relationship before it's too late, which is why we saw the Iran war. They're pushing and racing to get this done now before it's too late.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree because, obviously support for Israel has waned off significantly, right? It used to be our allies no matter what. And then even now you got people who are like evangelical Christians that are hardcore Zionists like Charlie Kirk. Even they're saying, yeah, we can't get offensively involved. So, the anti-war stance is very popular because we saw what happened with Iraq, right? And I know you obviously have family that were there, but I've been a huge critic of Iraq as well. That we literally, I'm going to talk about Dick Cheney later today, as a matter of fact, on this stream, and how he was like the architect and took Bush's naivety against him, and he kind of was the architect of the Iraqi war because post in the early 90s when Cheney started to get some real footing in Washington, D.C., well, the USSR had collapsed. And, in order for the military industrial complex to exist, you need a perpetual enemy. And what we've done is we kind of shifted it from Russia to the Middle East. And then it's this war on terror, right? To justify the military industrial complex, because obviously it's a booming business. I mean, this guy used to work for, I forgot it was a military contractor. He left the government. Someone in the chat. Right? Yeah, Halliburton. Yes, thank you. Yes, escaped me for a second. So this guy worked for them for a bit, then came back into a position of power and became vice president. And the next thing you know, we're going to war. And Iraq had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. I've talked about this in intimate detail, how Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein were actually enemies, how Osama bin Laden got kicked out of Saudi Arabia for volunteering to fight Saddam Hussein when they invaded Kuwait, because he had just won the war with his Mujahideen against the Soviets, and he was on cloud nine, like, I can help out. And then, he was enraged when he found out that the royal family wanted to bring Americans in to fight Saddam on Holy Land. He was like, these guys, what are you talking about? Why are Capital going ahead and fighting the Saddam Hussein in Muslim land? This is bullshit. And obviously we all know Saudi Arabia doesn't practice any free speech. You can ask Khashoggi about that one. And they exiled them and they sent them to Sudan in the mid-90s. And, so many Americans are not aware of this, that they'll sit there and say, oh, he was connected to 9/11 and anthrax, all this other crap. It couldn't be further from the truth. They hated each other. Osama bin Laden lost his Saudi citizenship and got kicked out of his country for wanting to fight Saddam Hussein. So the fact that they were able to spin this lie on everybody and say, oh yeah, they were connected and they were involved and they got weapons of mass destruction, it's bullshit. And then you fast forward almost 20 years later, over 20 years later, and what are they trying to do? Same exact narrative. Oh, they got weapons, they got nuclear weapons. We need to invade Iran now. And that goes back to what you're saying with the quicksand analogy, where they've weakened all the proxies. The axis of resistance is significantly weakened, and they realize, okay, we want regime change. We can deliver the death blow now. And they put Donald Trump under an enormous amount of pressure to bomb Iran and get involved. And I do think that a big part of the reason why he got elected is because the Zionist lobby rallied around him, because they knew that he was going to be friendlier to Israel than Kamala Harris. Because the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in America when it comes to Israel is the Republicans openly cuck for Israel versus the Democrats do it surreptitiously. When Netanyahu came to the United States like last year to ask for more money, a lot of the Democrats didn't go to his speech, right? A lot of the Democrat representatives didn't go to his speech. But he met with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago and had a discussion with him. Kamala Harris didn't go, but she met with him privately after, right? And that wasn't widely reported. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to Israel, Democrat or Republican, they're going to support Israel. They just do it in a different way to ensure for the Democrats to not make their constituents pissed off. But they still support, they still give the money. So that's a big reason why I think Trump was able to get in, is because the Zionist lobby rallied behind him. The Adelsons and Bill Ackman and the tech bros all got behind him as well, even though they're lifelong Democrats. And the big part of it was because of Israel. So, yeah, man, it's wild to see. It really is, bud.
So I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you have a long stream.
You're good, man. No worries.
On your own channel. But I want to ask you, in your view, realistically, what can be done for Americans to kind of take back their country from Zionist control? If you look at the Biden administration, like 67 out of 100 possible staffers from high to low levels on the administration were Jews, were Zionist Jews. And those who weren't were like evangelical Zionists, like they were all Zionists. And people argue all the time. They say, well, Israel is still, there's this debate over like, does Israel control American foreign policy, or is Israel an extension of American foreign policy? There's very good arguments for both. But I think what we've seen, and their argument is that like Israel doesn't, like America will only do this for Israel because it actually serves America's interests. And this is determined in the Pentagon, right? But then when you look at the Pentagon and these other institutions, they're just places made up of people, and the people are Zionists, so yeah, America's doing this and it comes across as if it's in their interest, but who are the decision makers? Increasingly, they're Zionist Jews. So these are unelected positions, and even the electable positions in the White House or Congress or whoever, all of these are bought off. The system is rigged. The Zionists have mastered it better than any other lobby. So what can Americans do other than talk shit on social media?
Yeah, I'll definitely answer that. I actually wrote down, because I was going to add to this thing with the whole Iran thing, with the Iraq war and it being, repeated. I'm one of the few people that said that I think the intervention with Iran was actually a monumental failure. I don't think that it was a W whatsoever. And this is kind of how you're able to tell of like the boomer conservatives that watch Fox News, because Fox News is pushing out the propaganda saying this was an enormous victory. We went into Iran airspace. They didn't even know it. We bombed them, destroyed Fordo, destroyed all their nuclear capability, and then got out before they even knew what hit them. Cool. Look at our might. Awesome. But the reason why I look at it as an L is simply because of this. Israel, we know, wants regime change, right? You know this, I know this. Anyone that's aware of this problem understands this, right? And I know that the White House has been saying, well, we don't necessarily want regime change. We just don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. But what they don't realize is the whole nuclear weapon thing is a BS lie, just like they did with Saddam Hussein, saying that he had weapons of mass destruction, saying, oh, they have nuclear weapons, they have nuclear weapons. And I've always thought it was interesting how Israel has an unacknowledged illegal nuclear program that they stole from us, but they're trying to sit there and say, oh, well, we don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. When Iran was actually complying with the IAEA and having inspectors come in, and we had the nuclear deal. I think Trump pulling out of the nuclear deal in 2018 was probably one of the worst foreign policy decisions we've ever fucking made. One of the worst. And, and basically, we brought this upon ourselves. He pulled out of the nuclear deal. He appoints Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State. He puts the IRGC on the terrorist watch list. They impose crippling sanctions. What the fuck do you think they're going to do? It's like, we got to have some common sense here. If you went ahead and you had an agreement put in place that was working, literally working, we had the whole international community involved, to include ourselves, to oversee their nuclear program, and you really care about peace and you really care about them not having weapons, why was it such a big deal? Well, Netanyahu cried and we said, lobbied, came to the United States, disagree with the sitting president Obama when it comes to the nuclear deal. And next thing you know, Trump gets in with pressure from the Zionist lobby, pulls out the nuclear deal, appoints Pompeo. They're on the terrorist watch list. Sanctions are cripple them. And obviously they're going to say, you know what? These guys are going to try to come in and destroy us like they saw with Saddam and Gaddafi and everything else like that. And they put themselves into like a threshold state. Let's be able to have these nuclear weapons. And the reason why, to bring it full circle, why I think this was a huge L was they used the nuclear weapons as a pretext to infect the regime change. They understand that the only way that they're going to affect the regime change is they need a justification to get in. And the nuclear weapons was what it was. But they failed because Israel activated multiple of its, Mossad assets within the country. They built drones over a long period of time. They destroyed the air defense. They jammed the radars. They assassinated generals, killed nuclear scientists. They were absolutely trying to affect the regime change, right? If they only wanted to get rid of the nuclear weapons, they could have just bombed the nuclear facilities. But no, they went ahead and killed military personnel and scientists to try to affect the regime change because they thought, okay, if we go ahead and we kill a bunch of their top people, there's going to be a disheveled government, and maybe one of these insurgent groups can rise up and overthrow the government. It didn't work. It actually backfired. The Iranians now are more united than ever before. The people that challenged the theocracy before, well, they might not like the Ayatollah, but they hate Israel more. So now they're all rallying behind. And this is, it's crazy to me how like the American media doesn't cover this whatsoever, right? You have to look at like alternative media to find this stuff. I was watching Israeli news, and like they finally admitted, oh yeah, they hit us pretty hard in Tel Aviv. They destroyed a couple of our strategic locations or whatever. Meanwhile, Fox is saying, oh yeah, Iran barely made a dent on Israel. That's a lie. They destroyed one of their Oman bases. They bombed the hell out of Mossad. They attacked one of their nuclear facilities. They destroyed the oil refinery in Haifa. They did all this stuff with their missiles, and that's with all of these other countries assisting them, like the U.S., France, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. All these different countries were helping Israel defend itself, and they still got missiles through. So I think a big reason why that ceasefire happened within the 2 weeks is because Israel was no longer be able to get those expensive interceptor missiles to keep shooting down Iranian rockets. So I think it was a disaster. I think it was a big failure on our end. We got involved. Even if we did, let's assume the American narrative is correct, that we actually destroyed their nuclear capability. Right now, the Pentagon is saying that we destroyed their nuclear capability for about 1 to 2 years. It doesn't matter. The regime is still in power, and they know how to make a nuclear bomb. They've already mastered the uranium cycle, uranium enrichment cycle. They understand how centrifuges work. They even understand how plutonium and nuclear reactors work. So they can absolutely do it again. Even if you push them back a year or two, they can do it again. And then on top of that, you've nationalized the country, you've made them galvanate behind the leader, and now they have an even stronger resolve to get nuclear weapons now and be something like a North Korea, where they're doing it to ensure that the U.S. never fucks with them again. Because and then Israel took their shot. They activated their resources, and they couldn't get it done. So there's no way this ceasefire is going to continue. I've heard rumors where Israel's already attacked Iran a few times with like some secret drone strikes. It's not being reported in media because obviously I think that would hurt the ceasefire situation, and Trump obviously has a big ego. But there's no way this ceasefire is going to last because Israel wants a regime change, and it's the only way that they can get what they want. But to answer your question with the my bad, I forgot to mention that before. But to answer your question with like the problem in the U.S., I think step one is getting rid of the Zionist lobby, AIPAC, and the other, because AIPAC is just the biggest one. There's like 100 others that are huge that, don't have to register under FARA, right? I know people make jokes all the time and say, oh, look at Tucker Carlson, he got money from Qatar, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? Qatar's got to register under FARA. That's how you even know that he got money from them, or if he didn't get money from them, right? So at least it's registered, right? I've heard some Zionists say, oh, well, the Chinese lobby spends the most money. Yeah, and we know that because they're registered, right? The Israeli lobbies, they're not registered. There's 1 million of them, and we don't know how much money is going. We just know, oh, Myron Gaines gave $100 million to Trump, or I think $200 to $300 million over his 2 terms. But that's just one person. We don't know about all the other donations that came.
That are tax exempt. Yeah.
So I think step one to reclaiming our country is we don't have to necessarily get rid of them, but we have to make them register under FARA, all the Zionist entities. I think that's step one. And then that will start to kind of slowly allow for the dissipation of their influence in America. That's step one.
Yeah, very well said. Absolutely. That's an important step. I guess, I don't know, man. The people who would make the decision to have them register, they're Zionists themselves. So,
that's why
there needs to be like a bottom-up revolution. It
has to be. Yeah,
there's no other way, really. And I'm racking my brain trying to figure it out, and I can't.
Well, I'll tell you this. So check this out, because this is what has me actually optimistic, and I talked about this the other day. So, though, I don't agree with Mamdani's policies from a political standpoint, I do think it's important to know why he's winning and why he's more than likely going to become the mayor of New York. Obviously, there is a deep dislike of Israel and politicians that take Israeli/Zionist money. Mamdani campaigned on being, one of the few politicians that isn't corrupted by the Israel lobby. And that made his numbers huge, right on top of all the other, political stuff that he has. But I do think it's important to note that if he wins mayor of New York, and becomes a candidate for the mayor of New York City, that's going to set a precedent where we now have the first politician in a real position of influence in one of the most critical cities in American culture that isn't controlled by the Israel lobby. Now, obviously, it's at a state level, a city level at that. But I think if this trend continues, it could eventually see its way into the federal level where we have the real problems. Because at the federal level, these are the guys that deal with the foreign policy. These are the guys that give all the aid, et cetera. But if we can get a mayor in, right, that is anti-Israel into New York City, I think that sets a precedent. And I want all the Republicans out there and the conservatives that might oppose him politically, that's fine. I understand, I don't agree with the socialist ideology either. However, I do think it's extremely important to note that we got someone going into a position of power that isn't controlled by Israel. And I do think that we can replicate that on the right or for the libertarians or whatever and get someone in maybe a Thomas Massey in the future. But yes, I agree with you that, yes, it is going to take time. It's going to take resources. But I do think with, influencers talking about this topic and, kind of changing the public sentiment, we're absolutely making things happen because, I'll give you an example of how I know that we're making it done. So when Donald Trump bombed Iran, he already knew when he was going to do it. But if you notice, when he did interviews with the media and when he was talking about it, he wasn't so gung-ho. And then when he did do it, they were very adamant to say, oh, this is a one-strike thing. It was for peace. We're not going to get into a war. No boots on the ground. And a reason why is because people in his base, that thought he was going to be anti-war really rallied against him getting involved in this conflict. So even though he got involved in the conflict and it pissed a lot of us off, he did it in a limited fashion. And then he tried to, kind of cover and say, this is the only thing we're going to do. We've negotiated a ceasefire after whatever. And I think that's powerful because if we go back 20 years, right, and this happened back when legacy media controlled everything and influencers had no say, he would have maybe went to full-fledged war. He would have bombed them even more. So I do think that the people stepping up and using platforms like Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, et cetera, and talking about these problems, people with a voice, that makes politicians move in a certain way where we're slowly starting to move the needle in the way that we want. And I think if we do this for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, et cetera, it's going to continue to become better and better. It's a slow process, but I do think that with, the effectiveness of social media and how we've kind of taken the narrative from mainstream media, we can absolutely, influence politicians to do what the people actually want versus, the Fox News and the CNNs giving the bullshit propaganda.
That's an excellent point, and it's a hopeful message. It's a lot more positive than I would have been. But I think you're right. There's a lot of progress to look at, to be proud of, to be grateful for, and to build upon. And that's why I think, it was important for me to invite you here and introduce you to my audience. And I know that people have, political differences. Obviously,
Sure.
They really despise people on the far right, like Fuentes and others. But I think on this issue of Israel-Palestine, we need to understand that there is a common enemy and we are united and we can all improve our own positions across the political spectrum if we can, unite in discourse around this issue. So, and I think that's happening. I mean, people don't need to agree. People can just kind of do whatever they're doing in their own lane from the left or the right and get this done. But yeah, that's what's happening now.
Yeah,
so,
like I said, Mamdani doing this, hopefully that inspires people on the right to say, you know what, maybe I'm going to go ahead and take a stance that's a bit more, sovereign with America first versus, giving in to the Zionist lobbyists. So hell, we can go ahead and take that blueprint and use it for on the Republican side. So I think it's a W. We need to basically what we need to do is we need to get to a point where both sides, both Republican and Democrats, are starting to become, we don't give a fuck about Israel anymore. And I think if we can get to that point, alongside influencers talking about this topic all the time, we're going to create the pressure in the environment for it to actually happen, where they're going to get to a point where it's more painful to take Israeli money than it is to, go against them. And if we can, change that balance and get it where they're scared to take that Israeli money to lose votes, that's when we got them. And I think we're going in that direction. It might take a decade or two, right? It's a slow process, but I definitely do think it's possible because influencers are starting to have way more of a push in the political discussions than mainstream media and traditional celebs. And I'll end with this, with Trump, if you look at him, when he campaigned in the 2024 election, he went on podcasts almost exclusively. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris got a bunch of A-list celebrities to endorse her. Well, Trump smashed her. And though I think he would have won anyway, it was by a significant margin. And I think him leveraging TikTok, social media, influencers, going on podcasts, that's the new media versus getting, Taylor Swift or Eminem or these other stupid ass A-list celebs to endorse you. Like the A-list celebs and that level of those types of celebrities don't have the same level of influence on the people as like a Joe Rogan does now. So I think the tide is shifting. The people are starting to get the voice now. And we can yell at the politicians and tell them, look, we're not going to fucking vote for you guys if you guys aren't going to put America first. We don't like Israel getting all of our aid and killing kids on our name. Let them fucking fund it for themselves. And I think if we do this for long enough from both parties, we can absolutely effectuate that change and take our country back.
Very well said. Myron Gaines, everybody, from the Fresh and Fit podcast. Take a look at his profile. You can find him as Myron Gaines on X and
on everywhere. It's Myron Gaines X on YouTube, Rumble, Kick, Twitter, everywhere. The only thing, Instagram is Fed Reacts, because like you, I've had to make like 10 different Instagrams.
Yeah. So are you on Instagram now?
Yeah, it's Fed Reacts.
Okay. Yeah,
that's my IG.
I'll have to give you a follow on there.
Yeah, I'll follow you back.
Yeah, I appreciate having you on, man. Really
no worries, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing all that you do, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. It was a good discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. We'll talk again. Peace.
Yeah, take it easy.
Later.
So there you have it, folks. That was my conversation with Myron Gaines. I'm taking a look here at the chat. I want to hear from you guys. What did you think of this conversation? I wasn't able to read the chat because I was listening intently to Myron. Very eloquent and articulate guy. I've heard him speak before, so I know that he was capable of this, but he is very well informed. And that is just something like you'll never hear Andrew Tate have a discussion like this. Not to knock Andrew Tate. I'm not trying to do that, but I'm just trying to point out the difference between another influential figure in the red pill manosphere, giving relationship advice and uplifting men and things of, in that kind of space. You'll never hear Andrew Tate have this kind of discourse, but Myron Gaines it seems like he can go toe to toe with most people in this space. And that's why he's so influential and important. So, I'm glad that, I had a discussion with him, and I'm glad that you all got introduced to him. I'm sure there are many people in here who already know who Myron is, but maybe some of my followers don't know him. So taking a look at some questions here. Okay, there's some people who aren't happy. Brother, for the sake of God, Myron ain't that guy. You need to show more discernment on who you platform and engage with. Well, I just explained, at the beginning of this live stream, and I just explained a couple of moments ago why I platformed him. I think it's important to engage in discourse with people on the left and the right from all walks of life, because we're all part of this conversation and the discussion and this fight against Zionism. And so I think he's influential and he's important, and he's been an important part of the conversation. So agree to disagree on that. Scar 2 Trail says, great work, brother. John says, W. Tom Nook, are you Nick Fuentes? Me? No, I'm not Nick Fuentes. Jared said, yeah, you didn't miss much of value. Little Iggy says, the Jays, that was great. Excellent content. Perhaps go deep in their books like the Talmud. Have you been demonetized? I have not been demonetized yet. I wouldn't say I'm making a living, but I'm paying rent, and I got the lights on. I got the internet. So I'm still going, baby. So yeah, that's possible because of monetization, but I don't personally make a lot of money doing that. But so Brendan Crawford says, Myron is awesome. Don't listen to those haters. MZ says, this was a great convo, bro. Falcon says, bro, you didn't challenge anything he said. Yeah, that wasn't my intent. Why would I challenge most of what he said? I agree with a lot of what he said. We're on the same page, especially when it comes to Israel and Zionism. Why the hell would I challenge any of that? I'm in complete agreement with most of what he said. So yeah, I'm not going to challenge that. Why would I? I don't really, try to do that too often anyway. I only challenged one person once. I did it to Scott Ritter, and I'm not happy that I did that, because I tried to play devil's advocate, and I ended up defending positions that I don't really have, and it just created a lot of confusion about what. So ever since then, people have accused me of supporting Jelani or HTS and things like that. And the Syria conversation, I think people who follow me know my position on Syria. It's a bit nuanced and different from most people who are very tribal on both sides of this issue. But yeah, after that experience, I was like, I don't want to do that, ever again. I think if you have an issue with what the guest is saying, do it in the comment section, or wait for me to bring on someone and platform someone who disagrees with them and can provide a counter perspective. But I think I ask the questions and I let people talk, and that's what people enjoy. If you look at our interviews we're doing with academics and journalists and experts, people are saying that they really appreciate me just letting people talk, like uninterrupted. Let them get into a flow state and just share and express their ideas. These are brilliant people. Let them do their thing. And every now and then I'll, pause them and ask a question or ask them to clarify. Or maybe I'll provide a soft challenge, just to bring in a different perspective. But yeah, that's it. So that's why I didn't challenge him. And I agree with him anyway. Mamala Harris says, Myron is dope. I don't agree with all his relationship advice, but he's intelligent. Absolutely. He is very intelligent. Dr. Shiva. So I've come across Dr. Shiva. I haven't listened to too much of their content, but he's a funny guy if I'm thinking about the right person. Bahadur says, I like Shiva. Hustlebone says, anytime truth gets spoken, I'm on board. Yep, same here, buddy. Mayfta, did he advocate for Palestinian freedom? Yeah, I think he did by criticizing Israel. Otherwise, what's to criticize Israel for? If you don't care about Palestinian freedom, you wouldn't even open your mouth about Israel, but he does. So I think, indirectly, and he was advocating for Palestinian freedom, and he's already, he said that he's against the genocide in Gaza. And so I don't think he wants the killing to stop, and that's it. I think he also would like to see the end of their enslavement. So yeah, I would assume that he supports Palestinian freedom. Loki, God of Mischief, says a lot of what Myron said was accurate, but you can tell he's very weak. He has a very weak grasp of the details. I wouldn't label Myron as brilliant. Well, he's brilliant in the way that he articulates and communicates his ideas. That's what's brilliant about him. Obviously, he's not an academic. He's not an expert. But what he's capable of doing is conversing with those experts and academics. And I would describe myself in that way as well. I'm not brilliant. I'm no expert. You guys follow me because I make interesting videos, but you guys, if you've listened to me, you know that I'm not, that great with the details either. I can converse with the experts though, who I learn from. And that's what Myron does. And he learns the talking notes and he does his thing. Infinite B says you should still do soft challenges at least. Yeah. I don't disagree. I don't have a problem with that. But like I said, I agree with much of what he said tonight. Ben Foster says, good interview. Thanks. Well, thanks, Ben. It's a pleasure to have you here. SD says, yes, we need public discourse. The sunlight disinfects. Absolutely. Glass Blaster says, I left the chat and just came back to mock you, all because I was right. Dude was from a Muslim nation. You drink up his propaganda. Yeah, who cares where the truth is coming from, bro? Who gives a shit? Baymio Split says, I found your channel immediately after the U.S. attacked Iran. I don't regret subbing. Keep up the good work. Thanks. If you're new here, I should say, so I do explainer videos. That's what has gone viral, and that's what I'm famous for. But I also do podcasts. And recently, if you look at my videos, specifically under the Podcasting Co. playlist, you'll find a lot of live streams or pre-recorded interviews with journalists and experts. But that's not all that I do. I've been doing that lately. I'm currently researching a video to kind of update you guys on the specific details of the recent Iran-Israel war. But what I'm most known for are explainer videos. And so if you look at my playlist or just scroll down previous videos, you'll find explainer videos on how Hamas survived, right? The use of tunnels in Gaza. You'll find explainer videos on the red heifers like Myron specifically mentioned. You'll find my explainer video predicting the Iran war, which took place. Everything happened except the dropping of a tactical nuclear weapon. So yeah, I do these explainer videos. We also do satirical sketches. Haven't done one in a while, but we have some really funny ones that you guys might enjoy. So take a look at that. They're very vulgar, like South Park style, but they communicate some interesting ideas. So take a look and let me know what you guys think. Ken's family says, Myron made me aware on a lot of today's foreign politics. I have similar thoughts to Myron's domestic politics, but the Jays are crazy. Yeah, thanks for commenting. Irrational says, Prop, thanks for what you do, sir. Cable TV is going bye-bye. Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Wobbler says he's American. Did you not hear his accent? Hustlebone says you got to get Daryl Cooper on here. Okay, I'll have to look into him. Oh, Hustlebone, I follow you because I thought this was Blumenthal's channel. Just saying. Yeah, I've done a lot of work with Max Blumenthal at this point, including Atrocity Inc., the documentary, which I edited. He wrote, of course, and presented. I did the editing on the documentary with Soot Jolly, the famous filmmaker and director. I traveled to Iran. I met Max there, and we did a podcast together recently. A lot of my viral videos were possible because of his article. So at this point, I've done quite a bit of work. I filmed Max interviewing Professor Marendi while he was in Tehran at the Martyr Cemetery. Max, when he took a tour of the Ibrak torture prison and museum in Tehran, that was me filming. So yeah, we've done quite a bit of work together. Anam Khan, thanks for the super chat. Really appreciate it. All your super chats and your subscribing, whether you pay for it or not, go a long way to support our channel. But thank you, Anam, for always being part of our live streams, but also supporting us with a super chat. That's great of you. So we want Fuentes. Hey, I would love to get Nick Fuentes on here. I know it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers and piss a lot of people off, but you know, like I explained earlier, the benefit and value of understanding the perspective from someone like Myron Gaines, it provides a lot of value. And if you hadn't heard from him before, I think listening to him tonight, you can tell that he's passionate, he's articulate, he's informed, and he is fighting this fight against Zionism and Israel, and he's making a difference. So, and I think that's evident in this chat. People are commenting about how Myron has helped shape their views and their understanding by whether it's by educating them directly himself or interviewing special guests. So Fuentes obviously is a lot more controversial than Myron, I think, but he's still impactful. So definitely, I'm open to talking to him. Grant K says W with a $10 super chat. So thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Shout out to you. Thanks for all your support. And just know that, whatever you contribute goes a long way and helps keep the lights on here. So I really appreciate that. I did not watch the debate with Fuentes and D'Souza or whatever his name is. I didn't watch it, but I saw the reviews, and seems like Fuentes was well behaved, hopefully trying to bait and encourage other people on the mainstream to debate him so he can kind of save the can of whoop ass for the right person on the biggest stage, right? Hopefully that's what he's waiting for. So, but yeah, Joy Duncan says, I subscribed to you after listening to your interview with Max. I figured that was you filming Max at the Martyr Cemetery. Yeah. So Joy, let me know what you think, because if you follow Max, you're probably not the kind of person who would maybe follow Myron Gaines and Fresh and Fit and probably disagree with a lot of his views, especially on women and relationships and things of that nature. So how do you feel about me like platforming someone like Myron Gaines? I don't know if you were here for the whole thing, but as I explained, I think he provides a lot of value and his perspective is interesting. And he helped us gain a deeper understanding of this rift on the right in MAGA over Israel. So someone like you, who probably is an anti-imperialist, follows Max and all the work he does at the Gray Zone, what did you make of my conversation with Myron? Yeah, I'm not afraid to platform who I want. I don't want to alienate a lot of my followers, but I really don't like when people tell me who I can and cannot talk to. I really don't like that. I don't like Zionists trying to censor me, and I don't like my own followers trying to censor me. And I know it's not the same. You're not censoring me, but you are kind of leveraging your support for me and saying, I'm going to withdraw my support for everything that you do because you're having one conversation with one person that I really don't like. And I don't think that's a good thing anyway. I think we need to be open to different conversations. That's how we expand our mind and gain a deeper understanding. Even if you don't want to work with, let's say you want to undermine your enemy, you still got to understand them, right? So let's say you consider someone like Nick Fuentes your ideological enemy. Well, it's helpful to listen to them and understand what they do right and what they do wrong, so you can, do a better job of debating them or undermining them. So, I mean, from every way you look at it, whether it's just to gain a deeper mutual understanding or to undermine someone, like you have to expose yourself to their information. So, yeah. So Joy says, yes, first time listening to Myron. I want to hear from both sides. Well, I appreciate that. Just a heads up, Joy. Myron has very interesting views on women and relationships. I'll just give you an example. His best-selling book is titled Why Women Deserve Less. So you're probably not going to enjoy a lot of some of his other stuff, but on Israel Palestine, you might find yourself in agreement. And so, yeah. I don't know. Tanega 74 says you should always study your enemies. Yep. Mama Lahara says you typically don't see people on either side of the political spectrum going against the grain. Sarah says we appreciate you. It's up to you who you invite to your podcast. Keep up the great work. Thanks, Sarah. Sarah is a moderator in our chat, and she's a diehard, follower. She's a propagandist. You're all propagandists, but she's propagandist number one, and she's been supporting us since the beginning. So much love, Sarah. Appreciate you. Infinite B says, true, Dilly from Five Pillars still talks to people he disagrees with strongly. Yep. Good point. Hustlebone says, real talk, we live in a moment when all that really matters is where you stand against genocide. Yep, absolutely. Infinite B says, crazy title. I guess he's talking about the book. Ramsey says, Fuentes is amazing, Habibi, and I love him. I'd enjoy that interview a lot. Yeah, so... If I get the interview with him, I'll definitely do it for sure. And, I met Fuentes a year ago. I don't think he knows me personally. He may have come across my account. But I met him because I went to go document the America First conference a year ago in Detroit. So last summer, I guess every year they do their conference at the same time that Turning Point USA does their conference. So and it was a big conference. Trump went to go speak there. And so a lot of people were there for Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA. And, in the area in downtown Detroit, Fuentes and America First were having their conference, the AFPAC conference, America First Political Action Committee, I think. And the event was weird. Like, to pay for it, I had to use Bitcoin because they're debanked. And it got canceled because the venue dropped him. So then they delayed it, and the event took place at night. What was supposed to be a VIP session, which I paid for, to gain access to like Fuentes and document him. Ended up becoming the conference itself. So everyone attended. So it was kind of this crazy rooftop experience that it was just wild. But yeah, I met him there. And that's where that fight, if you remember, when the black security guards got really angry at Nick Fuentes and the America Firsters. And honestly, for like legitimate reasons, they were saying Fuentes was trolling them. And yeah, they got really upset. But they went from security guards for the event to like threatening to shut down the event, and so they shut down the event, and it caused a fight, and the security guard jumped off stage and punched Sneeko in the mouth and broke his tooth. And I was standing right there when that happened, and actually I caught some shrapnel because one of the Groypers threw a glass cup at someone. I don't know who I hope they weren't throwing it at me thinking like, oh, he's brown, he's against us, but they were throwing it at maybe the security guard, and they missed, and I was holding my camera, and they hit my left hand and sliced my middle finger open, and I had to go get stitches at like 4 a.m. It was the worst. It was the worst experience, and it took like 2 months for that to heal. So I was at the gym like squatting or like bench pressing, and I had to keep my hand like this for like 2 months just because I didn't want to bend and open that wound. So yeah, the America First conference was kind of crazy. Bahadur says, don't know Myron, but content was great. Joy Duncan says, my best male friend also has quite a bit I disagree with when it comes to women and relationships. Occasionally, I do agree with them. Yeah. So that's good. It sounds like you're an open-minded person. Doesn't sound like you cancel people over disagreements. Houdini says, Myron is a G. Follow him since he started with Fresh and Fit. Very honest dude and cares a lot about the truth. And yes, he's a Muslim, but he never likes to mention it. Yeah, I mean, he opened up saying he's not very religious. But that, he is, I don't know if he identifies as a Muslim, but like he might be agnostic or atheist. I don't know. I haven't had that conversation with him yet. So maybe Houdini can let us know. Irrational says, shout out to Nick Fuentes. We need more 25-year-olds like him. Ramsey says, where are you from in the U.S.? I am in Tampa, Florida. So that's where I currently am. Somino says, Myron is not Muslim, guys. He said it a million times that he don't practice it. Infinite B says, that's crazy. R.I.P. Sneeko. Tanega says, that was an epic Superman punch. It was epic. And actually, I got video of it in like 6K on my Black Magic, but I never released it out of respect to Sneeko. Felt like he might be upset about that. But yeah, I never released it. I met Sneeko as well, but same thing. Like, doesn't follow me. We didn't like connect personally. I have a picture with him, but just like Fuentes, like it's just, you know, happened to meet him there and don't really have a personal relationship with him. But I definitely want to get Sneeko on the stream soon. Houdini says he just doesn't like to mention it. He doesn't talk about religion, so people do not use it against him. The haram police. Yeah, it makes sense. Houdini says, what's my ethnicity? So I'm Kurdish. I'm a Kurd. So ethnically, you have Arabs, you have Persians, you have Turks, and then you have Kurds. Kurds are the largest ethnic population in the world without a state. I'm not a nationalistic person. I don't believe in nationalism. Like I don't believe you need to like have your own state based on your ethnicity. I think it's okay for Kurds to be part of like a greater, you know, Middle Eastern state or Muslim state, Islamic state, whatever you want to call it, as long as they have equal rights. So I'm not like, oh, Kurds need to separate. I'm not a big fan of that. But I am Kurdish, and from the Kurds are split up in Turkey, in Iraq, in Jordan, in Syria, in Iran. The majority are in Turkey. The second largest population is in Iraq, which is where I'm from. So Samino says, how do you have a picture with Nick? I don't have a picture with Nick Fuentes. But I do have pictures of me at the America First conference, but I have a picture with Sneeko. Houdini says, we all do haram things. He doesn't mention it exactly because of these kinds of comments about his acts. Religion is spiritual, brother. So something between a person and God. Samino says, do I believe in Kurdistan? I think, Kurdistan is definitely a place. It's a region. And the Kurds love mountains, and I love mountains. I grew up, visiting my homeland and the Kurdish regions of Iraq in the north and the northeast, and the mountains are gorgeous, and the lakes, the rivers, etc. So I believe in Kurdistan in that sense, but I don't believe that Kurdistan should, have like an anti-Arab sentiment and break away from its neighbors and undermine, the national security interests of the other countries. Obviously, in the past, Kurds have been like severely oppressed. And so I don't want to see that continue either. But, we're seeing equal rights, for Kurds, and their position is improving across the region. So I hope that continues. And there's no need to separate. I don't think we need more independent states along ethnic lines. I think we need more unification. We need more cooperation and collaboration, and eventually the creation of, a larger, more proper state like here we have in the United States. That would be nice for the region. So, that's kind of what I hope Kurdistan could be part of. Houdini says, appreciate your content, brother. I'm South Moroccan. That's from the Sahara. Keep working, bro. We need more people like you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Houdini. Please release that Sneeko video. No, I can't. Maybe I'll show it. I'll get Sneeko's consent and I'll show it when I interview him potentially. Why are so many Kurds against Islam? Are they radicalized in your opinion? There is a large like secular Kurdish population. I think it's just, the effects of colonialism, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the spread of secular ideas. It's affected everyone, not just the Kurds, but Kurds are, especially the more educated they get, the more secular they become. But actually there are a lot of religious Kurds as well, very Islamic, not obviously the more, it's not to say that educated Kurds cannot be Islamic or Muslim, but a lot of the educated class and, are in like secular circles. And so like drinking is very common amongst like these secular Kurds. But you do have religious Kurds, and most of the impoverished are going to be like more Islamic. But yeah. Badr says, yo, you are a Kurd. I did think you don't exactly look Arab. Did you know Kurds are an organic people? Did you know Iranian and Kurds are from the same line of ancestry? Our root language is the same. Yeah, I don't doubt it. I haven't looked at like the origins of the Kurdish people. I need to, but I know that parts of Armenia, there's a place called Divin, Dvin. It's like an ancient historic place, and Kurds, hail from that region and potentially other parts of Europe as well. So if I were to do a DNA test, which I haven't done and I never will because I know what they do with your DNA, um, I'm sure I would find that I'm not just ethnically Kurdish because I look very Persian, but also I can be very I don't know. I have people tell me I'm South Asian, like Pakistani or Indian, and so most Kurdish people are lighter in complexion. So like some of them will come across as straight up like white, white skinned, I should say, not like white features, but yeah. What do they do with your DNA? Well, they take it and they use it for whatever testing. They sell it to other companies, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I say that. Okay, guys, I'm going to get going. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I'm glad that you enjoyed the stream. Do me a favor and just before you leave, drop a comment in the comment section. Helps with the algorithm. So right now you're in the chat. Just switch over to the comment section. Drop a comment. Hopefully it's more than a few words because that's also great for the algorithm, the length of the comment. But go ahead and just let the comment section know what you thought about this conversation, and yeah, that'll help out a lot. So I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. And for those who joined from Myron's channel, welcome. I really appreciate you guys being here. If you like interviews with journalists and academics and experts about geopolitics, then this is the channel for you. And if you like really well polished explainer videos, take a look at my playlist and you'll find some of that content. So I'll be coming out with a new version of that soon. But right now, a lot of my content is just interviewing people. So the playlist might be kind of confusing. I need to organize it better. But yeah, so for all the newcomers, welcome. Thanks for being here. And all the official propagandists, thank you for all your support. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for the super comments. Thanks for liking and commenting and subscribing. All the support that you provide keeps us going. So I really appreciate that. I'll see you guys in the next one. You guys have a blessed night.